We haven't scheduled any other press events, but for tomorrow the picture is significantly different. In addition to your usual midday briefing, of course, we have a press conference by Vice President Reding at 3 o'clock. At 3 o'clock here on our communication on an EU anti-drugs policy. As we announced on Friday, the European Commission will tomorrow publish a communication to strengthen drugs control policy. We aim to ensure a coordinated and effective response to drugs trafficking and seek to determine how to strengthen European legislation on new synthetic drugs, which are increasingly sold on the internet. And Vice President Reding will be here in this room to speak to you on this very subject tomorrow at 3. At 4:30, we will have a press conference by Commissioners Barnier, Andor and Tajani on the so-called responsible business package. I referred to this on Friday, but let me refresh your memory. Tomorrow in Strasbourg, as part of its ongoing work to create better conditions for growth and employment, and indeed to place trust and social inclusion at the center of a more sustainable economic model in Europe, the Commission will adopt the responsible business package. And this package of proposals will call for a fresh look at the role of entrepreneurship and responsible business. And it will include, first of all, an initiative on social business to help this emerging sector to thrive. Secondly, a strategy for corporate social responsibility, which is aimed at generating a higher level of trust and confidence from consumers in business and improving all companies' contributions to society's greater well-being. And finally, and thirdly, proposals to improve transparency and promote sustainable business among multinationals, in particular for companies active in the extractive and forestry sector. And finally, proposals to simplify accounting rules for small and medium-sized enterprises. Commissioners Barnier, Tajani and Andor are, as you know, responsible for various elements of this package and will, as I said, be here to present it together at a press conference in Strasbourg at 4:30 tomorrow. And of course, for more information, you can contact Cristina Arrigo, Carlo Corazza or Chantal Hughes. And I couldn't wish for a better transition to talk briefly to you about what was achieved over the weekend, since indeed new sources of growth were very much at the heart of the first part of yesterday, when the European Council, as you know, agreed on a series of important conclusions, including on growth, because, as you know, and I hope you've had the opportunity to look into the link to President Barroso's presentation on new sources of growth, part of the answer to the part of our crisis response must be growth, as the President stressed in his first intervention yesterday. And indeed, this followed a very thorough representation that the President made to the heads of state and government at the European Council on Europe's sources of growth. I hope you've all received it, showing how we can recover indeed some of the 2 trillion in growth that we have lost because of the financial crisis, and very much charting the way with specific initiatives and measures that we can adopt to boost growth in this presentation. And we were very pleased to see, as the President said, conclusions of the European Council that show ambition in this chapter by using the full potential of the single market, by building a digital single market by 2015, by helping SMEs with venture capital and smart regulation, by fighting protectionism and promoting trade liberalization and smart regulation, just to mention some of the elements that the President underlined in his presentation and that you will find in more detail in the documents if you link up to them or indeed pick up copies which we have at your disposal. And we will provide, as the President said, a list of specific proposals by the end of the year that can indeed be fast-tracked for adoption by the European Council in December to help boost growth in Europe, the growth that we need to get Europe firmly back on a growth path, a sustainable growth path, and out of the crisis. So this was very much how the sequence yesterday was kicked off, and it set the tone for the rest of the day and the very many important discussions, both those that took place in the European Council. You know the conclusions, so I'm not going to take you through them once again. And then, of course, the evening's Euro Summit, where work, as the President very clearly outlined jointly with President Van Rompuy, where we made a lot of important progress towards this comprehensive solution in 5 points that you are well familiar with by now, since we have had the opportunity to communicate it extensively. You saw the President stress that we have achieved very important agreement to disperse the sixth tranche to Greece, the next tranche of financial assistance worth €8 billion, and that we have discussed different options on the table and on which work is still ongoing to increase the firepower of the EFSF. The President is very confident we can achieve progress and get agreement on this by Wednesday. And you know how essential an element this is in fighting contagion, as the President stressed. We have, as you know, since January this year we have argued that the EFSF needs to be more flexible and effective to enable us to manage and overcome the sovereign debt crisis, and the President sees this position as now very widely shared. And in addition, as you know, we made very good progress to design coordinated measures to ease bank funding and to ensure that banks have significantly higher levels of capital. Now we need to complete the work. This is, of course, very much related to the issue of financial backstops, and therefore the deal on the banks is linked to the rest. We cannot finalize it before we have agreement on everything. And just to complete the picture, and very much basing myself on the President's speaking points that you have at your disposal, hopefully, there was a very interesting and good discussion on governance in the Euro Area Summit, and it very much it was obvious, and there's consensus around this, that we need to complete our monetary union with an economic union to have more integration, more discipline, and more convergence. So this is where we are in what one could perhaps, and let me use my great football credentials for this, say we're at the half time now and we need to play the second half on Wednesday, stealing an image from a colleague. And so there's a lot of solid work ongoing to secure a deal on a comprehensive response on Wednesday. This is what we're going to be able to say on this today. So I encourage you in the meantime to look into the growth agenda that we have, and which is so multifaceted, and indeed where so much important work is ongoing in the meantime. And of course, as I said in the beginning of the briefing, we have many other important issues coming up in between now and Wednesday. Now we are open for questions. Lorenzo.
Yes, Pia. I think we badly need a technical briefing, off the record possibly, on the ongoing discussions on technical issues, on all these things that are going to be decided on Wednesday. So do you plan, is the spokesman service planning to have this technical briefing and when, because I think we really need it in order to arrive there on Wednesday with some more precise ideas. And off the record means that you don't have to give us some definitive things. We can also have more or less the options, and then at least we know we have an informed debate on this. Thanks.
There, I really plead for your understanding, Lorenzo, because at the moment, this is so much work in progress, and our experts are involved in negotiations on the different options on the table as regards the ESFF and as regards the private sector involvement for Greece, and it is really not possible at this point in time to add to the hopefully quite thorough, let's say, picture and knowledge that you will have received if you participated in our recent technical briefing, where indeed we had all the experts here explaining to you how we see indeed the scope for solutions which are now are being discussed and negotiated upon not very long ago. We cannot add to this picture at this point in time because things are moving, negotiations are ongoing, and until we have more clarity, there is no possibility to organize this technical briefing. We will, as soon as we can, once we have an agreement, mobilize as much as possible our high-level officials to come and explain to you the options retained. But until we have those options narrowed in, once we have political agreement on them, we will not be able to organize this technical briefing. So I really ask for your understanding on this. You cannot do a new technical briefing while the negotiations are ongoing. Go ahead. We can, of course, always point you to existing information, and we're happy to do so, and there is a lot of existing information already on the table. Lorenzo.
I was trying to say is that we need a technical briefing before there is a political agreement. I don't understand why you want to have the political agreement before the technical briefing, because technical briefing is exactly to understand the political agreement when it comes, and we can have a technical briefing on the options. We don't have to have the agreement before we understand the technical points.
I understand what you're saying, Lorenzo, and that's precisely why we did organize a very exhaustive technical briefing right after the President had put his roadmap on the table with the 5-point plan, which includes all these issues on which we now have negotiations. It would be a repetition of that briefing, and I'm sorry, but the experts are in the negotiations now. They were able to come here when the President had presented the plan, and there I think we rolled out very, very extensively what type of options we see as viable and desirable, of course off the record, because this is decisions for the leaders. Now our experts are working on solid solutions that can enable leaders to take decisions on Wednesday. Go ahead.
A question for Amadeo. Yesterday evening, at the end of the Council, the Italian Prime Minister announced the possibility of a pension reform in Italy, with the idea of raising the retirement age at 67, and they're actually working on that. There will be a Council of Ministers this evening. I would like to know if these measures is in the direction that you are suggesting, and if you think that will be the possible solution for the Italian situation. Thank you.
Yes, on this point I can only repeat what I said before even the meetings of the Eurogroup and the ECOFIN, and I was referring to comments by Commissioner Rehn to some of you. Basically what the Commission is looking for is swift adoption, followed by rigorous implementation, clear timeline, clear commitments of the growth-enhancing structural reforms already anticipated by the Italian government, and this is only one example of them. There will be other examples, for instance, concerning labor markets, concerning the judicial reform, and this kind of comprehensive, and I insist on the word comprehensive, not punctual, but comprehensive set of measures that is required in order to tackle the deep-rooted